to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca, and today I'm on my way home from actually picking something up from Facebook Marketplace. But that's not very relevant to today's topic, because today we're going to be talking about kind of memory making, preserving our experiences and things like that with our classic cars, and something that I've had a go at to try and do something a little bit different with how I record my experiences with Peggy. Obviously I have the podcast, but this was something else that I had a go at as well. So quite some years ago now, when we were clearing out the house of one of my grandparents after they'd passed away, I was handed a Kodak Retinette 1B Type 037, if you're that sort of nerd who's into these things, which is a camera from approximately 1960, 61, 62 kind of period. And it was inside its original case that it would have come with, and inside that case there was a little sticker with the address of my grandparents' house up in Northumberland, and it was in really lovely condition. Looked like it had almost hardly been used, in fact, and it was just absolutely immaculate. And I was given it as we were clearing stuff out because essentially I liked old things. This was well before I'd got Peggy, well before I'd moved out or anything like that, and it was kind of a case of, oh, you might like to display that or something in your future home, because we were looking and thinking about perhaps moving out once I'd got a job sorted and stuff like that, because I was still doing my master's degree at the time, and it was because of that master's degree and something that I learnt about on that master's degree that I was like, no, I'm not going to just use it as a display piece. I'm actually going to have a go at using it, making some photos with it, and having a go at kind of doing something that I'd heard about on that degree. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about something that is called Photovoice, and essentially it was a way that some researchers developed to try and help individuals who were being interviewed or being part of focus groups capture their lived experience of something and help them shape their voice when they might have otherwise had difficulty talking about a topic. Researchers within my field, social sciences, are quite interested in making sure that individuals who participate in the research feel like they have a part to play within that research, like they have some ownership over that research. And Photovoice was something that a lecturer of mine, Dr. Wendy Fitzgibbon, during my degree was a big advocate for. She'd used it in particular with people who were on probation, who were to talk about their experience of the probation service, to talk about kind of whether they felt that it was helpful to them, whether they were getting what they needed from it, and how it made them feel. And essentially the way that Photovoice is structured is that these individuals are provided with a film camera of some sort, usually a disposable camera, where they're limited in the number of shots that they can take, and they're limited by obviously not knowing necessarily what those photos turn out to be like, and they use those number of shots to try and explain the experience that they have had with whatever the research topic is. So a really standout example for me was that one of the individuals who was on probation spoke about how they'd taken a photo of their feet and it was because they spent a lot of time looking down at their feet because they lost a lot of self-esteem and things like that through the system. And they might not have been able to kind of verbalise that to the researchers if it hadn't been for the fact that they'd gone, actually this is a view of mine that I have quite a lot, I'm going to take a picture of it with the camera that I've got. And then when that picture was produced to the researcher asked, okay, so why did you take this picture? What is it that makes you feel this way about kind of what it is? And that's quite an in-depth explanation. But essentially, these very select photos that you are limited in the number that you can take, you're perhaps limited in the number that actually work out. The probability of a camera that is a disposable camera, that's a new camera, that is more likely to work, is possibly more likely than a camera from the early 1960s that hadn't been tested. And also I had no experience of even using camera settings or anything. So my first step, once I'd got the camera, was to learn all of that sort of thing, learn about f-stops and also distancing, because it's a range finder, I think is the term. So you have to kind of estimate the range of your perspective and all these sorts of things to get things in focus. And it was a really, really different thing to learn how to use. But I felt like it was a really appropriate way to capture my car, it being a piece of 1960s technology and my vehicle also being a 1960s piece of technology. And I decided that with one of my first rolls, after I'd tested out the camera and made sure that it did kind of what I expected, I wanted to try and capture my Photovoice experience of owning and dailying a classic car from the 1960s on a piece of 1960s technology in 2022, I think it might have been that I was doing it, or late 2021. I think it kind of spread over some of that winter, and it was a case of I loaded that camera up with a roll of black and white film. I think it was Ilford 400 XP2, if again you're interested in those sorts of things, and I suspect there's more crossover between the two than I realise. And it was a case of the camera came with me for a lot of trips, a lot of events, a lot of things, but I would only take a picture on that camera when I felt like I wanted to really kind of capture a moment and experience a feeling that I could then reflect on. So it took me quite a while to fill up that camera with some of those images, and what I've got for you today is 10 of those images and the kind of notes that I made about those images and about the kind of thoughts and things that I'd got, and I thought I'd share them with you today in the hope that maybe some of you might consider getting yourself a little vintage camera and recording your own experiences of your cars and kind of what it's like to own and use the cars in a way that's kind of different to what you capture on your phone, because it is a very different quality of image, a very different style of image, and also very different experience in terms of you don't know if it's turned out okay or anything like that. And so I've got 10 images, partially because some of those images didn't turn out right, but also because I wanted to narrow it down for the format of this video. So image one I labelled, how does your car keep up with modern traffic? As you can see today, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, I'm out quite happily keeping up with modern day traffic. But the image that I'd taken was in some standstill traffic where we were sat there for quite a while, and we were at some traffic lights waiting for it to be our turn, and you could kind of just through the image make out some of Peggy's chrome work, some of her unusual shapes compared to the other vehicles that surrounded her. But ultimately, she was sat in traffic much the same as all of these modern cars. And my answer to the question of how well does your car keep up with modern traffic is that it keeps up with modern traffic as well as modern traffic often it has to, in terms of it doesn't matter what age of car you're in. If you're sat in standstill traffic, you're sat in standstill traffic. And for a lot of commuting and things like that, you do get hit with traffic, you do get hit with bad road users and things like that, and I'd much rather be in this little bit of quirky technology than a modern car that didn't make me feel as happy when you were stuck in traffic. So that was image number one. Image number two, I named number 13, please, and this is because during this time Peggy and I were filling up pretty regularly at the same petrol station, and it's an image of Peggy at that petrol station at petrol pump number 13, which is where we pretty much always ended up. It was a petrol station on the way home from work. I'd fill her up usually about once a week, and we almost always got the same pump, and you'd go in and you'd say number 13 please, and it was usually same sort of time, same ladies working on the tills, and you'd have a little chat with them about the car. And it wasn't until there'd been a couple of weeks of me perhaps going away on the weekend, having an adventure on the weekend, filling her up additionally elsewhere because we'd done more miles that week, and then coming back and those staff attendants saying to me, oh, we missed you last week. You don't kind of realise what an impact you can make on people by driving such an interesting and unique car until perhaps you're not around in it and they want to share with you the impact that seeing you pretty regularly has on them, which I thought was really lovely. Image number 3 is named after an interesting little factoid that I heard once, and that is that parking spaces are based on the average car size of 1953. I believe it's actually based very closely on the size of a Ford Anglia from 1953. But I'm not 100% sure on that, but I'm pretty sure it stuck with me that parking spaces are based on a car from 1953. And of course the Morris Minor came out in 1948, celebrating 75 years this year, and that didn't change shape or size until the end of the run. So Peggy, being a 1968 car, is still the same size as the car would have been in 1953. And this image of Peggy sat in a car parking space at work, nice and central in the box with quite a lot of space around her, with much larger modern day cars parked around her, just really shows how cars have changed shape, how they have really started to somewhat feel a little bit too big for the world that was designed around them. And it just shows that technology and cars have changed so much from her era, and in some ways she's better suited to things, because I've never had a problem getting her in a car parking space, never had an issue kind of seeing where she is in this car parking space, and just perfectly sized for it. Image number 4 is named Are You Selling It? And this comes from the fact that this photo was taken in, I think it was a Sainsbury's car park. I'd parked Peggy up to pop in to grab some food for dinner that night on my way home from work, and I know that loads of other classic car owners do this too. You just kind of look back and you think, that looks really nice. It's not the most scenic place, but it's just a lovely little spot that your car fits perfectly in, as I've said in the previous section, and they just look great. They look right at home, and it had a nice little tree and some interesting railings in the background. So I took a photo of it on my camera, and as I took it, somebody walked past and said, "Oh, are you selling it?" And I said, "No, why?" And they said, "Oh, you're taking pictures of it." I don't think they'd clocked that I was taking pictures of it on a very old camera at that point. And apparently, most modern car owners only take pictures of their cars when they're selling them, which I'd never really thought of, because my camera roll is absolutely filled on my phone and everything with pictures of Peggy in all sorts of random places where I've just gone, "She looks really nice today, I'm going to take a picture." But obviously that's not necessarily something that translates to everyone, and is a bit of a classic car owner exclusive, or perhaps unusual car owned exclusive. Image number 5 I named "How Was Your Weekend?" and it was taken at the NEC during kind of breakdown, the very first time that I'd taken Peggy to display on the young members stand at the NEC. And I found that since owning a classic car, whenever you come into work and you get asked that question, "Oh, how was your weekend?" and I get that quite a lot because I'm quite facing a lot of people with my job, because I'm teaching students and I've got some great colleagues as well. And whenever I get asked, "Oh, how was your weekend?" I found that since owning Peggy, I've always had a great answer. I've always had something on at the weekend. I've always been doing something, even if it's something small like learning to do an oil change or whatever. There's always been something going on for me to say, "Oh, I did this weekend." And always has great conversations with either students or colleagues during that Monday morning lull. Image number 6 is "Sorry I'm late home." I stopped to take some photos, and again, this is another unique experience, I think, of owning a somewhat unusual car, in that during my first experiences of commuting with Peggy, I found that I was fortunate enough to drive past a lot of really lovely scenic places, and I wanted to stop off and grab some photos. And this particular photo I took on the camera for this experiment, but also took some beautiful photos on my phone and loads of other things, because the sky was just absolutely gorgeous. It was such a scenic little place to stop and pull over. And I got home and Jamie was like, "Where have you got to?" And I was like, "Yeah, sorry, I just stopped for 5 minutes on my way home," and it was probably closer to 10 minutes to take a load of photos, because the sky looks so pretty, which I hope is something other classic car owners and unusual car owners can relate to, and it's not just me being super weird. Image number 7 is, there's an engine in there, you know, and it's a picture of Peggy's engine bay, taken towards the end of the film reel, because I'd popped the bonnet open to, I think, just check oil and water as usual, and every time I do that, it does kind of make me think of the very typical response of any car enthusiast when you go to an event, in that if you see a bonnet up, people are all round it, having a nosy, seeing what's in there, seeing what changes you've perhaps made. And in reality, with Morris Minors, they're all quite similar. But regardless, those bonnets go up and the heads peer in. And it's something that I've remembered seeing around cars for years and years and years. And then for my experience to be the exact same, that the minute that I took Peggy to her first Morris Minor event and we opened the bonnet, we were there, I think we were getting ready to go, and we were there for that little bit longer just because people were sticking their heads in the bonnet, having a chat, having a nosy, looking inside, and yeah, just an unusual, unique phenomenon again that is part of this shared experience, I feel. Image number 8 is grease your trunnions or else. I remember joining various Morris Minor Facebook pages and things like that, and seeing my first image of a Morris Minor whose suspension had collapsed and the wheel had fell out because the trunnion had given way and snapped. And it's a horrifying sight for someone who owns a Morris Minor. It's not something you ever want to see. And this image is of me at my parents' house doing exactly that, greasing my trunnions. Because whilst when I got Peggy, I don't think I'd really done an awful lot of checking oil and water on anything. I was determined to try and get more hands-on with my ownership of Peggy and learning these things, and greasing your trunnions is something that's simple enough, can do a lot of good, prevent a lot of harm, and is really that unique experience of owning a car with this sort of suspension, and but also a shared experience with so many Morris Minor owners who are equally terrified of that ever happening to their pride and joy. And those days where, like this one, I've gone round to my parents to do bits and pieces with my dad have been really special things that I'm sure I'll come on to remember very fondly, because you'll spend a couple of hours outside working on whatever it is. I mean, most recently it's been a lot of front suspension problems, which are now thankfully fixed, and then having a cup of tea and a chat inside with Mum before heading off with whatever we've addressed newly sorted, and I'm sure those will be very cherished memories that are kind of encapsulated within that image. Image number 9 is dubbed, I can vouch for that, well rapid, which is a joke that some of the young members have said about Peggy, because of some of the modifications that she's got that are supposedly meant for speed. Not necessarily my experience all of the time with her, but this image was just such a fluke, and I wasn't expecting it to turn out just as great as it does. It was another kind of example of me pulling over to take some interesting photos and things of Peggy. And in this particular instance, I must have got the settings accidentally just right, where Peggy is quite well in focus, but the background is blurred, and so it looks like she's going at some great speed down this kind of woodland road. And when the image came back, I was thrilled, because that's not something that I'd ever seen. I'd never, usually when she's moving like that, I wouldn't see that because I'm in the driving seat. But to accidentally create that feeling of movement and that feeling of speed, even standstill, is kind of an exaggeration of that thing that these cars are not hugely powerful. So when you even are going at 30 miles an hour, it feels very rapid and quite a lot of fun. So for an image that was taken at standstill to look so fast and so fun, felt like a pretty good representation of that. Finally, image number 10 is friends in unexpected places. And the image was taken up at the Motorist in Christmas 2021, which is where we'd hosted kind of the young members' Christmas meet that year. and for us it had included like 7 hours worth of driving in total. We'd driven up the day before, stayed with some friends in there that we'd met through the cars, had a day there, and then gone on to have kind of a Christmas lunch together before we headed back home. And I think I'd had my COVID vaccine and everything the day before, and it was, but the image was supposed to just be kind of a picture of Peggy to kind of commemorate this big trip that we'd done. But what it turned out to do is show the reflection of myself and some of the people that I was with in her bonnet as I'd taken the photo. And I think for some photographers, that sort of reflection might ruin the picture or whatever. But for me, it made that picture even more special because I wasn't expecting to see the kind of silhouettes of the friends that I was with in the bonnet of Peggy when that photo came through. And it really does summarise how once you get into classic cars, it's much more than just owning an unusual car. It's about the lifestyle and the friendships and everything that comes with it, and the fact that you do end up with some friends in some very unexpected places within the country that you really enjoy travelling to meet up with and things. So those were my 10 images that I selected to kind of summarise my experience as a classic car driver, and this must have been about this time last year. Since then, I've really took to taking film photos a lot. I think we've got 2 more different sorts of cameras now. I've got one with kind of interchangeable lenses that is a Praktica, and then also for my birthday this year, Jamie bought me a half-shot Canon Demi, which allows you to take more photos on a particular reel than a standard camera would, because the images are half the size on the reel. And I've continued to enjoy using all of these different cameras to capture cars in the way that they would have been done in period, and also in a way that a lot of cars have been captured for a long time. Like my family have loads of photos that were printed and taken on film cameras over the years of car shows and things like that, and that's in fact why I got the Praktica, because I tried out my dad's one, which he'd taken most of his photos of his cars and rallies and things like that on, fell in love with it and wanted to kind of use something like that for some of my things. And I took some absolutely gorgeous photos in the Lake District and things with that when we did that trip. By limiting myself to kind of 2 roles for the trip and really thinking about what shots I wanted to take on it, again I was using much of the things that I'd practiced within my kind of Photovoice experiment, and also thought about things like framing and all these things that you don't necessarily do when you're taking a quick snap on your phone camera. And I've got some of my favourite photos in the last year or so from using some of these film cameras, and there's nothing like it when I send my film off to be scanned and then they send me an email with those scans in, and when that email comes through and you click through to the link to see the photos on Dropbox, there's nothing like it. It's so exciting to see kind of how things turned out, what worked, what didn't work, and it's just a really fun way of capturing those memories in a different way to what you do normally. And I always take photos on my phone, I'm always filming with this, but there is something really special about what comes from my film cameras as well. I hope you've enjoyed this slightly different episode today and enjoyed listening to kind of my experiences summarised into kind of 10 little points. If you've been watching over on the YouTube, then hopefully you've enjoyed the images that I've shared. I'll be sharing them over on social media as well, so you can check those out if you've listened on another podcasting platform. I'd love to know if you've used kind of some contemporary technology alongside your vehicle. Have you got a contemporary radio or something like that? Or perhaps a camera that you take photos of your car with? Or if you're thinking that perhaps this summer you're going to try out some Photovoice for yourself. But in the meantime, drive safely and happy motoring.